In the quiet corners of our daily lives, something remarkable is always at work, an unseen power that shapes relationships, emotions, even the structure of our brains. It is not money or time or even effort. It is words. These seemingly simple constructs of language possess the astonishing ability to reshape neural pathways, influence biological systems, and mold our perception of the world and ourselves. The journey into the power of words begins not in grand speeches or formal declarations, but in the subtle, everyday interactions that define our humanity. Long before science could measure brain activity, sages and philosophers hinted at the mystical strength of language. Now, with the advent of neuroimaging and cognitive research, their intuitions find validation. Scientists like Andrew Newberg and Mark Robert Waldman have revealed, through decades of exploration, that words can literally alter the structure and function of the brain. Words do not merely represent ideas, they create physical reactions. They stimulate neural circuits, trigger the release of chemicals, and alter gene expression. With every word spoken or heard, the brain is subtly rewired. In a clinical setting, researchers observed how a single positive word could initiate a cascade of beneficial neurological effects. The moment someone hears the word peace or love, their frontal lobe activity increases, especially in the areas related to logic and reason. Conversely, uttering words like hate or no can send the amygdala into high alert, stimulating fear, stress, and anxiety. This biological reaction is not symbolic, it is measurable. Words carry weight, and that weight lands heavily upon our biology. Understanding this, it becomes evident why mindfulness is a crucial part of effective communication. Slowing down the speed at which we talk, listening with full attention, and speaking with intention do more than improve relationships. They protect the brain. Just as loud noises can damage the ears, harsh and reckless language can damage trust and emotional safety. Words have the power to wound or to heal, to build or to destroy. In the realm of relationships, whether personal or professional, this understanding changes everything. Imagine a conversation between two people. One speaks calmly, using affirming and inclusive language. The other listens fully, without interrupting, reflecting back what they hear with empathy. This dynamic does more than resolve conflict. It builds a neurological bridge between two brains, syncing their emotional rhythms and increasing the likelihood of mutual understanding. It's not merely a social exchange, it's a biochemical event. During a study involving couples in therapy, those who practiced mindful dialogue experienced notable improvements in emotional regulation. Their brains began to show increased activity in areas linked to empathy and decision-making. Those who simply spoke without mindfulness showed no such change. The implication is profound. Intentional communication literally alters the brain structure and enhances emotional intelligence. The key to unlocking this power lies in a concept Newberg and Waldman describe as compassionate communication. This is not just about being nice. It is a scientifically supported practice that involves 12 steps, beginning with one of the most powerful: relaxation. When the body is calm, the brain enters a more receptive state. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of reasoning and empathy, activates, while the threat-focused amygdala calms. Relaxation alone can prime the brain to receive and deliver messages more effectively. Following relaxation comes inner centering. This means becoming fully present, letting go of distractions, and preparing to engage fully with another person. This state of mindfulness sharpens attention and improves memory recall. It allows words to flow not from habit or reaction, but from thoughtfulness and clarity. From this space, communication becomes more than an exchange of words. It becomes a dance of shared presence. Visualization adds another layer. When people visualize the outcome they desire in a conversation, peace, understanding, connection, their brains align to that intention. Visualization activates mirror neurons and primes neural circuits for collaboration and harmony. It is not fantasy, it is mental programming. What the brain rehearses, it begins to believe and create. Another powerful step is observing nonverbal cues. While words are the focus, gestures, expressions, and tone of voice carry immense influence. The brain processes these nonverbal signals rapidly, often before it registers actual words. A smile or a gentle tone can create a sense of safety, while crossed arms or a harsh inflection may trigger defensiveness. By becoming attuned to these cues, speakers and listeners can fine-tune their messages for greater connection. Then comes speaking slowly. Rushed speech increases the cognitive load on the listener and reduces comprehension. Slowing down the pace of speech, pausing between thoughts, and allowing silence creates space for the brain to process. It also signals respect and openness. In neurological terms, it keeps the limbic system calm and allows the prefrontal cortex to lead. Listening deeply is perhaps the most transformative skill of all. Deep listening means setting aside judgments and reactions, giving full attention to the other person's message. It activates regions in the brain associated with empathy, reducing the dominance of self-focused thinking. In experiments, deep listening was shown to reduce cortisol levels in the speaker and increase oxytocin, the bonding hormone, creating trust and emotional resonance. Responding with empathy completes the cycle. When someone feels heard and validated, their brain lights up in regions related to reward and pleasure. Even in conflict, empathetic responses can shift the tone of the interaction, dissolving tension and opening the door to collaboration. Empathy is not just a moral virtue, it is a neurological gift. Gratitude plays its part as well. Expressing gratitude not only lifts the mood, but increases serotonin and dopamine levels. These neurotransmitters enhance motivation, concentration, and joy. Saying thank you is more than good manners. It is neurochemical therapy. Over time, consistent expressions of appreciation can reshape relationships, increase workplace productivity, and enhance well-being. All of these practices converge in what the authors call the resonance of words. Words resonate within us not because of their dictionary definitions, but because of the emotional and neurological signals they carry. A word spoken with sincerity can echo in the brain for hours. A harsh word can linger for days. The brain remembers tone, cadence, and context just as vividly as it remembers content. In educational settings, the power of words becomes even more visible. Teachers who consistently use affirming, encouraging language activate motivation centers in their students' brains. This leads to higher engagement, better memory retention, and improved academic outcomes. In contrast, criticism and sarcasm can shut down learning, activating threat responses and diminishing curiosity. The environment created by words can either cultivate growth or suppress potential. In business, leaders who practice compassionate communication foster more collaborative, innovative teams. Employees feel safe, valued, and motivated. The data supports this. Companies that invest in communication training see reductions in turnover, increases in productivity, and higher morale. A single shift in vocabulary, from blame to inquiry, from judgment to curiosity, can alter the trajectory of an entire organization. Perhaps most moving is the role words play in self-talk. The internal dialogue we carry, silent but constant, shapes our mental health more than any external voice. When people speak to themselves with kindness, their stress levels drop, resilience rises, and decision-making improves. Self-compassionate language enhances neuroplasticity, allowing the brain to recover from trauma and adapt to change. In contrast, harsh self-criticism reduces motivation and increases risk of anxiety and depression. Neuroscience confirms what poets have long known. Words are spells. They cast intentions into the world and shape what comes back. Whether in prayer, affirmation, or everyday speech, our words sculpt our reality. They influence not only how others perceive us, but how we perceive ourselves. In moments of silence, even the words unspoken carry energy. They echo in memory, reappear in dreams, and influence future choices. The brain stores emotional associations with language like bookmarks in time. What we say matters, what we hear matters, and most importantly, how we say it, the tone, the pace, the presence, determines whether our words heal or harm. This truth places immense responsibility in our hands. Every conversation becomes a moment of creation. Every sentence holds the potential to uplift or to wound. With awareness and intention, we can choose language that fosters connection, peace, and growth. We can become architects of the brain, not only our own but of those around us. The science is clear, the impact is measurable, and the opportunity is profound. In a world of noise, choosing mindful, compassionate communication is a revolutionary act. It is not merely a soft skill, it is a survival tool, a tool that begins with a single, deliberate word. As the days pass and conversations unfold, it becomes clearer that the brain does not merely process language, it is sculpted by it. Every conversation leaves behind a neurological trace, a faint echo in the corridors of memory. These traces accumulate, forming patterns that define not only how we relate to others, but also how we relate to ourselves. The architecture of the brain is dynamic, shaped moment by the rhythm, tone, and intention of our words. In therapy sessions with trauma patients, neuroscientists noticed something remarkable. When patients began to describe their experiences using compassionate, constructive language, brain scans revealed reduced activity in the amygdala and increased activity in the prefrontal cortex. This shift indicated not just emotional release, but cognitive reorganization. The trauma was no longer commanding the brain. Instead, language was reclaiming control. Words were becoming medicine. This revelation led researchers to explore how the brain responds when someone tells their story, not just factually, but with emotional resonance. They discovered that when a person speaks about a painful event and is met with genuine empathy, the listener's brain synchronizes with the speaker's brain. Their brain waves begin to mirror one another, establishing what is known as interpersonal resonance. This resonance creates trust, safety, and healing. But what happens when the listener is distracted, dismissive, or judgmental? The effect is the opposite. Brain scans show a spike in stress markers, a collapse of synchronization, and a return to defensive neural patterns. The emotional door slams shut. In this sense, the quality of our listening has just as much power as the quality of our words. This is where the 12 steps of compassionate communication truly matter. After mastering the art of relaxation, inner centering, and visualization, one must also learn the discipline of emotional awareness. Recognizing one's own emotional state is crucial. Without it, communication becomes reactive. With it, communication becomes intentional. The brain begins to operate from a place of choice rather than impulse. There is a subtle but powerful shift that occurs when someone becomes emotionally aware. The neural circuits involved in empathy and moral reasoning become more active. Heart rate variability stabilizes, which signals a state of calm alertness. In this state, even difficult conversations become manageable. Instead of escalating, conflict begins to dissolve. Another key element in this process is the use of what the authors call positive priming. This means intentionally beginning a conversation with affirming statements, words that create psychological safety and open the listener's brain to receive information. A phrase as simple as, "I appreciate you taking the time to talk," can lower cortisol levels in both people. The brain then shifts from defensiveness to cooperation. Over time, consistent use of positive priming changes the way the brain handles all forms of communication. It becomes conditioned to expect connection instead of conflict. The stress circuits become less reactive, while the bonding circuits become more dominant. This transformation does not require years. It can begin in days with deliberate practice. But what about difficult emotions? Anger, frustration, jealousy? Are these to be suppressed for the sake of peaceful language? The answer, surprisingly, is no. Suppression creates more stress, leading to greater neurological damage. Instead, compassionate communication invites honest expression, but in a format that does not harm. Naming the emotion and owning it, "I feel angry," instead of "you make me angry," activates the prefrontal cortex and reduces blame. The focus shifts from accusation to understanding. This shift is not merely emotional, it is neurological. When a person takes responsibility for their emotions, their brain strengthens connections between the anterior cingulate cortex and the orbitofrontal cortex. These areas are associated with impulse control, emotional regulation, and empathy. In this way, using language to name emotions becomes a form of neural training. In families, this practice has far-reaching effects. Children raised in environments where emotions are named and respected develop higher emotional intelligence. Their brains are wired for empathy, patience, and cooperation. Conversely, in homes filled with yelling, criticism, or emotional silence, the stress response becomes dominant. These children may develop overactive amygdalas and underdeveloped frontal lobes, making emotional regulation more difficult in adulthood. The same dynamic unfolds in the workplace. Teams that cultivate a culture of compassionate communication outperform those that rely on hierarchical or fear-based communication. When employees feel heard, valued, and respected, their productivity increases, innovation flourishes, turnover decreases. This is not because people are being manipulated, it is because their brains are being nourished. On the flip side, toxic words, especially those repeated over time, have measurable negative effects. Chronic exposure to criticism, sarcasm, or ridicule increases levels of cortisol and adrenaline. These stress hormones erode health, impair memory, and shrink the hippocampus. The damage is cumulative and often invisible until the consequences are severe. In such environments, morale drops, creativity dies, and relationships fracture. To reverse this, the authors recommend daily reflection. Taking a few moments each day to recall conversations and notice where words were used well or poorly creates awareness. This awareness becomes the seed of change. The brain, being neuroplastic, begins to rewire itself in response to this intentional reflection. Over weeks and months, communication becomes more conscious, more compassionate, and more effective. Gratitude, once again, plays a crucial role. Regularly expressing gratitude, both outwardly and inwardly, strengthens positive neural networks. It elevates mood, enhances social bonding, and improves physical health. In studies, participants who wrote down 3 things they were grateful for each day showed significant improvements in sleep, resilience, and happiness after just 21 days. The practice of mirroring is also central to the transformation of communication. Mirroring involves repeating or paraphrasing what someone has said before responding. This technique shows the speaker that they've been heard. More importantly, it signals to the brain that the environment is safe. The limbic system relaxes, the frontal cortex takes the lead, conflict dissolves into conversation. In high-stakes situations, negotiations, interventions, or crises, mirroring becomes a powerful de-escalation tool. Law enforcement agencies, therapists, and diplomats use it regularly. By mirroring a person's words, tone, and emotional state, they build rapport, reduce resistance, and guide the interaction toward resolution. Once again, words become the bridge. But perhaps the most powerful insight of all is that communication begins within. The words we say to ourselves determine how we show up in the world. Self-talk shapes our beliefs, emotions, and behaviors. It influences our risk tolerance, our ability to forgive, and our capacity to dream. Harsh self-talk activates the same stress pathways as external criticism. Compassionate self-talk, on the other hand, activates healing. This is not wishful thinking. It is neuroscience. When individuals practice self-affirmation, their brains show increased activity in reward circuits. These individuals recover faster from setbacks, experience less anxiety, and demonstrate higher levels of motivation. The words we whisper to ourselves before a presentation, after a mistake, or during a challenge determine how our brains respond. To harness this, the authors recommend a practice called compassionate inner dialogue. This involves pausing during moments of stress and asking oneself questions like, "What am I feeling right now?" or "What does my body need in this moment?" These questions activate the brain's executive functions, reducing emotional reactivity and increasing clarity. The result is not only better communication with others, but deeper alignment with one's own truth. Meditation amplifies this effect. Mindfulness meditation, particularly when combined with affirming language, strengthens attention, emotional regulation, and empathy. Brain scans of long-term meditators show thickening in areas related to compassion and awareness. Their amygdalas shrink while their frontal lobes grow. The very structure of the brain evolves in response to intentional silence and kind words. All of this points to a singular truth. Language is the most powerful tool we possess, and yet it is one we often use carelessly. Each sentence, each phrase, each breath between words is an opportunity to build or to break. With intention, with presence, and with compassion, we can use language not only to connect, but to transform. The implications reach far beyond the personal. In communities, compassionate communication reduces violence, increases cooperation, and fosters social harmony. In schools, it enhances learning and reduces bullying. In healthcare, it improves patient outcomes and reduces burnout. The science is undeniable. The path is available. The choice is ours. When someone sits across from us and shares their truth, the way we respond matters. When we sit alone with our thoughts, the way we speak to ourselves matters. And when we raise our voices in public discourse, the tone and content of our language matter more than ever. Words can change the brain. Words can change relationships. Words can change the world. In every human interaction, no matter how small or routine, there exists the possibility of transformation. Each word spoken enters the ears but resonates far deeper, rippling through neural pathways and emotional circuits. The brain, with its incredible capacity to adapt, responds to language as though it were a sculptor's tool, etching new beliefs, emotions, and habits with every phrase. This truth, supported by neuroscience, changes not only how we speak, but why we must speak with care. As researchers delved deeper into the effects of language on the brain, one experiment stood out. Participants were asked to engage in daily affirmations using specific, positively framed sentences. These were not vague phrases, but clear, emotionally charged affirmations like, "I am capable of growth," or "I welcome peace into my life." After several weeks, participants began showing increased activity in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, an area associated with self-value and decision-making. This change was not superficial. People reported feeling calmer, more focused, and more resilient. The very act of saying kind words to oneself had restructured the way their brains interpreted challenges. This discovery gave rise to a central idea in compassionate communication. The brain listens to the words we choose, and it believes them. In group dynamics, the effects multiplied. In a corporate setting, a team was trained in the 12 steps of compassionate communication. Over a 90-day period, employee engagement scores rose dramatically. More importantly, the frequency of conflict dropped. Co-workers began mirroring each other's language styles, building rapport through positive reinforcement and mindful listening. Communication became more than a tool. It became the glue of collaboration. Teachers who practiced these methods also saw extraordinary outcomes. In classrooms where teachers began each day with affirmations and mindful breathing, students displayed lower stress levels and higher attention spans. Even in high-conflict neighborhoods where trauma and fear were part of daily life, the brain's ability to shift through language remained intact. The children's brains, when exposed to calm, intentional communication, began forming healthier emotional responses. This power, however, does not lie in words alone. It lies in intention. The brain is a sensitive instrument that reacts not just to what is said, but how it is said. When tone and body language contradict the spoken message, confusion ensues. The listener's brain picks up on micro-expressions, vocal tension, and gestures, and gives more weight to nonverbal cues than to the actual words. Thus, authenticity becomes essential. One practice recommended by the authors to enhance authenticity is breath awareness. Before speaking, a pause to breathe deeply activates the parasympathetic nervous system. This calms the heart, centers the mind, and gives space for true intention to rise. The difference may seem minor, but the effect on the listener's brain is immediate. Calm energy is contagious. The brain of the listener senses the speaker's stillness and responds with openness. Empathy, the heartbeat of compassionate communication, relies heavily on these subtle signals. When someone speaks with genuine empathy, the listener's brain releases oxytocin, the hormone of trust and connection. This chemical reaction fosters bonding and reduces defensiveness. Even in strained relationships, a single moment of empathy can open the door to healing. In conflict resolution, this becomes critical. Traditional arguments are often a tug of war between two activated amygdalas, each defending, blaming, and reacting. But when one person interrupts this cycle by pausing, reflecting, and responding with empathy, the neural pattern shifts. Instead of amplifying fear, the brain begins to seek resolution. Communication shifts from attack to understanding. The authors illustrate this through a story of a father and teenage son who were constantly at odds. Their conversations often escalated into shouting matches, leaving both parties drained and resentful. After learning the steps of compassionate communication, the father changed his approach. Instead of reacting to defiance with control, he began each conversation by validating his son's feelings, even when he didn't agree with them. Over time, the dynamic transformed. The son began to open up. Arguments became discussions. The neural rhythm between them found harmony. This transformation is not magic, it is biology. The more we speak with compassion, the more our brain reinforces those pathways. It becomes easier, more natural, and more effective. In essence, communication becomes a form of brain training, an ongoing process of rewiring neural circuits for peace, trust, and understanding. Yet this process requires one crucial element: patience. The brain, especially in moments of stress, does not always respond immediately to kind words. It may take repetition, consistency, and time before old patterns give way to new ones. But the change, once initiated, is lasting. Neural plasticity ensures that what is practiced becomes permanent. Silence, too, plays an essential role in this process. In the art of communication, silence is not absence. It is presence. It gives space for reflection, for emotion, for breath. In silence, the brain processes what has been said and prepares for what will be said next. Rushing to fill every pause robs both the speaker and listener of this crucial moment. Mindful silence is a gift, both biological and spiritual. In intimate relationships, this gift becomes even more profound. Couples who practice mindful communication experience deeper levels of trust and satisfaction. Brain scans reveal greater synchrony in their neural patterns, especially during eye contact, touch, and shared storytelling. These shared experiences activate mirror neurons, creating emotional resonance that cannot be faked or forced. Even in the face of disagreement, couples who use words with care are more likely to resolve conflict without lingering resentment. They use phrases like, "help me understand," or "I hear that you feel," rather than "you never," or "why can't you?" These subtle shifts in language dramatically alter the way the brain processes the conversation. From war zone to healing ground, the relationship becomes a space of safety. At a societal level, these insights are transformative. Public discourse, often marked by polarization and hostility, can benefit immensely from compassionate language. Politicians, leaders, and activists who use inclusive, calm, and affirming speech not only reach more people, they inspire cooperation rather than division. The brain, once again, responds to tone before it responds to content. And in a world of rapid information exchange, the tone of our words matters more than ever. Technology complicates this dynamic. In text messages, emails, and social media, tone is often lost. Sarcasm can be misread. Empathy can be hidden. The lack of nonverbal cues leaves the brain guessing, and often assuming the worst. That's why digital communication demands an even higher level of intentionality. Adding words of appreciation, using pauses, or even emojis to convey warmth can make a significant difference. The goal is not perfection, it is presence. In leadership, the difference between influence and authority often lies in communication. A leader who commands through fear may achieve compliance, but a leader who communicates with compassion earns loyalty. Brain imaging studies show that employees who feel respected by their leaders have stronger engagement, better mental health, and longer tenures. Language becomes the currency of trust. One tool that enhances leadership communication is the use of open-ended questions. These questions stimulate the prefrontal cortex, encouraging deeper thinking and creativity. Instead of saying, "Why didn't you meet the deadline?" a compassionate leader might ask, "What obstacles came up, and how can I help?" The shift in phrasing reduces threat and increases collaboration. But even the most skilled communicators stumble. What matters is repair. The ability to recognize a mistake, apologize sincerely, and return to mindful speech reactivates the neural bond. The brain forgives, but only when the heart is honest. An apology without presence is an empty sound, but a genuine apology, spoken with humility and eye contact, heals deeply. The authors emphasize that compassionate communication is not a technique. It is a way of being. It arises from a belief in the dignity of others and a willingness to see the humanity behind the behavior. It does not mean avoiding hard truths or uncomfortable conversations. It means delivering those truths with clarity, kindness, and courage. Ultimately, this way of speaking becomes a spiritual path. When we use words to elevate, to connect, and to heal, we align with something larger than ourselves. Whether in prayer, poetry, or quiet conversation, our words echo in the chambers of the mind and soul. They become instruments of grace. In a world that often rewards speed, aggression, and dominance, choosing to speak with compassion is a radical act. It means slowing down, listening longer, breathing deeper, and most of all, caring more. The science confirms what the heart has always known. Words shape reality. Words can change the brain, and through the brain, they can change lives. In the final chapters of exploring how words can change the brain, one truth emerges with unwavering clarity. Every person carries within them the power to influence the emotional and neurological states of others. This power does not come from wealth, status, or knowledge, but from the mindful use of language. Every sentence we speak becomes a ripple in the neural pool of another human being. And so, the story of words is also the story of connection. One of the most compelling findings from Newberg and Waldman's research was how sustained, positive dialogue impacts long-term mental and physical health. Patients who regularly engaged in meaningful conversations, those rooted in empathy and mutual understanding, displayed lower blood pressure, improved immune response, and reduced symptoms of anxiety. These were not simply psychological outcomes, they were physiological shifts, measurable through scans, blood tests, and clinical evaluations. This deepened the understanding that communication is not just a psychological event, it is a biological transaction. When two people connect through words that are thoughtful, safe, and validating, they enter a shared neural space. In that space, oxytocin is released, cortisol drops, heart rhythms synchronize, and the nervous system enters a regulated state. Over time, these interactions contribute to a sense of safety, trust, and community. In isolated individuals, the absence of such connections leads to the opposite. The brain, lacking affirming language, becomes more susceptible to depression, rumination, and even inflammation. Studies revealed that people who frequently experienced negative internal self-talk had higher levels of inflammatory markers in their bloodstreams. Language, it turns out, doesn't just shape thoughts, it shapes the body. The authors discovered that even a few minutes a day of compassionate communication, whether with another or within oneself, could create lasting change. For example, writing down 3 kind statements each morning and repeating them aloud activated the same neural pathways as social bonding. These statements did not need to be grand or poetic. Simple affirmations such as, "I am worthy of peace," "I trust myself," or "Today is a new beginning," were enough to generate change. Over time, the brain began to default to these pathways. Instead of reacting with fear, it paused. Instead of spiraling in self-criticism, it reached for balance. This is the beauty of neuroplasticity. The more you use a network, the stronger it becomes. The less you use it, the weaker it gets. And so, with deliberate use of words, you can train your brain for compassion, clarity, and courage. One striking case the authors share involves a man who had lived with a lifetime of anger and bitterness. His relationships had suffered, and his health was deteriorating. When introduced to the practices of mindful communication, he resisted. It felt foreign, soft, even fake. But over time, as he integrated daily breathing, reflection, and conscious speech, his emotional world began to shift. He learned to pause before speaking, to listen without interruption, and to replace criticism with curiosity. His blood pressure normalized, his sleep improved, and most importantly, his relationships began to heal. This transformation was not instantaneous, but it was inevitable. The brain had begun to trust a new pattern, and once that pattern became dominant, his life followed its rhythm. He was not the only one. Across hundreds of participants, the same results appeared: better emotional control, enhanced empathy, greater mental resilience, and deeper human connection. In professional environments, the long-term effects of compassionate language ripple across the culture. Leaders who consistently use affirming language and demonstrate emotional presence reduce absenteeism and increase innovation. The workplace becomes a safe neural environment, allowing for risk-taking, openness, and creative thought. Instead of operating from fear, employees operate from purpose. The same is true in healthcare. Doctors who communicate with empathy reduce the stress levels of their patients. This leads to faster recovery, greater trust, and even better adherence to treatments. It's not only about the diagnosis, it's about the delivery. A voice that carries calm and clarity helps the brain process complex information, while a voice filled with impatience or distance activates defensive reactions. These findings converge on one final insight: your words are never neutral. Every word you speak either uplifts or erodes, connects or divides, heals or harms. There is no middle ground. This does not mean that one must walk on verbal eggshells. Rather, it means becoming aware of the impact, and then choosing with intention. That intention begins with presence. Being fully present in a conversation is the most generous act of communication. When you look someone in the eye, breathe with them, and truly listen without planning your next response, your brain enters synchrony with theirs. This synchrony builds trust, and trust is the foundation of every meaningful relationship. Presence also requires boundaries. It's not about saying yes to everything or avoiding conflict. It's about speaking your truth clearly, respectfully, and without blame. It's about recognizing when silence is more powerful than words, and when words are necessary to reclaim peace. It's about knowing that the same sentence spoken from anger has a different effect than when spoken from centeredness. As the authors emphasize, this is not about perfection. Everyone slips. Everyone speaks carelessly at times, but the brain remembers intention. When people feel that you are trying, when your words come from a place of effort and care, their brains relax, they forgive more easily, they open again. The greatest gift you can offer another person is the willingness to communicate mindfully, even when it's difficult. There is also a spiritual aspect to language. In almost every tradition, religious or philosophical, the power of the word is sacred. In the beginning was the word. Mantras, prayers, chants, psalms. These are not just rituals. They are tools to rewire the brain. They create rhythm, focus, and intention. Neuroscience has now confirmed what mystics intuited for centuries. The repetition of meaningful language calms the nervous system and aligns the mind with higher states of consciousness. Even in solitude, the brain is listening. What you say to yourself matters. That quiet whisper in the morning, whether it says, "You can do this," or "You're already failing," sets the tone for the day. And so the authors suggest making a ritual of language. Speak to yourself as you would to a beloved friend. Start the day with kindness. End it with gratitude. Let your mind marinate in the sounds of compassion. One simple practice is the evening review. Before sleep, take a few minutes to reflect on your day. Recall 3 moments when you used kind or effective language. Then identify 1 moment you wish you'd handled better, and imagine what you could have said instead. This trains the brain for reflection rather than regret. Over time, the quality of your communication improves because your brain becomes more aware, more agile, and more compassionate. The cumulative effect of this practice is astonishing. Relationships become smoother, stress decreases, confidence grows, but perhaps most importantly, life feels more meaningful. Because when you speak with intention, every interaction becomes sacred. Every conversation becomes a chance to affirm your values. Every word becomes an act of creation. And so the book ends not with a command, but with an invitation. To pause, to breathe, to reflect, to speak not just to be heard, but to connect. To listen not just to reply, but to understand. To use words as bridges rather than walls. To become, through language, the person you wish to be. The brain will respond. It always does. Neurons will rewire. Circuits will shift. Hormones will align. And slowly, with practice, your inner and outer worlds will transform. Not through power, not through force, but through words. Words that are slow. Words that are thoughtful. Words that are kind. Words that change your brain, and the brains of everyone you touch. Thank you for joining us on this deep and transformative journey. In a world racing forward at lightning speed, the only true advantage is the ability to adapt, to grow, and to learn continuously. We hope this audiobook inspired you to challenge your comfort zone, embrace reflection, and become a lifelong learner. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Victory Think, your destination for powerful book insights, one story at a time. Stay curious, keep evolving, and see you in the next story.